This is a long time. Yeah.
Yep. So it's a minute after 7 and we're going to go ahead and get started. I know a number of people will be continuing to log on. And I'm actually thrilled to see not only a number of our regular people who are attending the classes, but we have kind of a special testimonial couple. Stu and Sharon Stevens were able to make it to the internet and be able to share their story. I think you'll find that pretty interesting. More than pretty interesting, probably pretty inspiring every time I have listened to it. I'm also really thrilled to have a potential medical student, someone who is applying to medical school, who decided to log on and check out the classes. And we're happy to see you, Kim. And also, hi, good to see you. And I've got my, let's see, Eat Your Veggies shirt that my daughter got for me back for Father's Day. And then I'm also thrilled to have a fourth year, rising fourth year student, which means pretty soon she'll be fourth year, from Southern California and UCLA, who really understands the benefits of doing something different than what the majority of her training has been. That's Juliet. And we're really thrilled to have you. I don't know what more I can say. When we have young people who are really logging on and showing this kind of an interest, it gives me hope for the future. You know, Scott and I have been doing these classes now for a long, long time. Personally, we've chosen this lifestyle for ourselves for over, I don't know, 11 years apiece. And we've been teaching classes. I've been doing it for probably 10 of those years, and Scott's been doing it for, I don't know, 8 or something like that.
5.
5, okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's got the
Teaching.
knowledge. He's got as much knowledge as I have after my 10 years of teaching. And together we kind of joke about being maybe partners in crime, the crime of trying to help people improve their life and their health. So anyway, we're happy to have you all, and it looks like we have a number of people here. Is there anybody here who is new that we didn't recognize, who might like to share who they heard about the classes from, and or why they're choosing to come to these classes, to share with those who are just logging on? Trouty?
Yes.
Oh, I see. You're just unmuted. Okay. Let's see if there is anybody else. So I guess what we want to do is, I was just trying to delay a little bit because we usually have a couple more people log on, and I just really want to kind of have them be able to hear Stu and Sharon's story. So I guess I'll ramble for just a couple more minutes. I started teaching these classes close to 10 years ago, and one of the first classes I was teaching was, they were based upon the CHIP program. It's a complete health improvement program. There were 18 lectures, and you know, people came for 18 weeks. They had their blood drawn in the beginning and then the blood at the end to show how much improvement they'd made. And they were getting some pretty good success, but people didn't really want to pay money to get healthy. They wanted to go to the doctor for their advice. And so my first class, there were 3 people that showed up to these 18 session of classes. And then I reduced the fee that this company wanted to charge. It was $600 a session, or for the 18 sessions. And I cut it in half, which was my cost of $350. And so 20 people came to that class, but they really didn't want to come because it cost them $350. So I looked around and found a bunch of videos and stuff that covered the same issues. And pretty soon 40 people came to the next set of classes, then 80, then 135. And the classes are continuing ongoing in Roseburg. And last week they had a new class that started between the online and in person. 120 people showed up to their first class. So our class sizes, we have anywhere from generally 30, 35, 40. When we start a new class, sometimes we get up to the 50 range. We just need to convince a few more doctors and providers, physician assistants, nurse practitioners that these classes are important for everyone. And they should be probably sending all their patients at least to a couple or a few classes so they can really learn the benefits of one's lifestyle choices. So with that said, I'm gonna stop rambling. One of my first classes, Stu and Sharon showed up, and I think I'm not gonna say anymore. I'm gonna let them tell their story. We've got time tonight. I've got a number of videos I want to share with you, but I really want to have you hear their story so that you can ask them questions, and especially those of you who have questions about diabetes. So take it away, Stu and Sharon. We're interested to hear your story.
I might introduce our story. It starts in January of 2015. Able to hear okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And prior to January of 2015, we had years of following a pretty healthy cardiac diet because I am a cardiac educator and was educating a lot of people after their heart attacks and heart surgery about proper way to eat. And so we really adopted a lot of that. So heart healthy diet. However, in January of 2015, we found ourselves following a typical path of looking at my own father, that he had his own heart attack and needed bypass surgery. And I looked at my own life and knew I was getting risk factors. I had been particularly concerned about Stu because he'll talk about his diabetes. He was kind of following the typical American Diabetes Association diet. But as we looked at our own lives and our risk factors, and the big thing that happened with me is I started a new job right then. And at the new job, they have like you have to pass a health physical. And I felt like I was very near to not passing. My blood pressure was quite elevated. And I knew at that point in time that I knew I had other risk factors, high cholesterol, high stress, weight. I was about, 60 pounds overweight. And so I personally knew I was carrying a lot of cardiac risk factors. And when that day came where I almost didn't pass my physical, I was able to talk my husband into attending Dr. Ross's class on healthy living. And so that's where our journey began. We were a little more nervous about it because of Stu's diabetes, both in wanting to be healthy, but also in the dangers of this diet, like if we were doing a safe thing. So I'll go on to introduce Stu.
So it starts for me about 52 years ago when I was at the age of 12, and I developed type 1 diabetes. And so, as you kind of heard from last week, type 1 diabetes is kind of like a light switch, where type 2 diabetes is like you could still have some insulin that you're producing, but with the type 1, the light switch gets turned off and everything becomes manual. So you have to take injections of insulin, and you have to, and especially 50 years ago, it was like you had to weigh your food all out to calculate how much insulin you were going to take. And even doing the best you can, you had real highs and real lows. And in 1971, life expectancy for someone, back in those days, they called it juvenile diabetes because only kids would get it. But life expectancy was about 20 years. And so at the age of 12, I'm hearing my doctor talk to my parents about, you know, he's got type 1 diabetes, and generally about 20, you know, plus or minus years is life expectancy. And so that's kind of my start of this whole thing. Luckily, I lived on a farm, so we actually ate fairly decent, but it was standard American diet. But, you know, I was getting some vegetables with my meat and potatoes. And
Less processed.
less processed stuff at that time, which, you know, I think that helped me go longer than the 20 years. And I ended up, what was also very helpful is working and going to camp for children with diabetes in Oregon, Gales Creek Camp. And I went there as a camper for 3 years and was learning from the endocrinologist from Good Samaritan in Portland. And so I felt like I was getting the correct information at that time. And then I became, when I started college, I was doing all my summers there. And then at that time, I always just thought, you know, I probably should not be getting married, having children, because my chances of passing that on to them, you know, I was like, no, not going to do that. I don't want to put that kind of life on somebody else. But I met this nurse at the diabetes camp who kind of talked me out of that part. And she's now sitting right next to me after 42 years of marriage. I thought I was just doing everything right. And I actually lived, you know, much longer, into 40 years with diabetes, but I had gained a lot of weight. I was eating at that time, you know, the American Diabetes Association diet was a low carbohydrate, because that helped you count your insulin, low carb diet, and high protein, which means a lot of fat. And so, you know, a meal for me, a good meal for me would be pork chops and peas. And I did that quite often, thinking I'm doing the right thing. And then I'm starting to develop some of the complications that people will get, some retinopathy in feet and eyes, and my blood pressure was high. I was like on 3 blood pressure medications. I was taking cholesterol medications, both to help protect my kidneys and keep my blood pressure down. But I was developing those complications. And so at that time, we decided I should try to retire early. And I had a wonderful career that I really loved, but it's like I wanted a little retirement time where I could, you know, do some travel and get around. So at the age of 56, I went ahead and retired, thinking, well, you know, things are starting to happen. I'm starting to develop some of these complications. I want to have a little time. And so it was just a year after that. And we were in Seattle, and we ended up moving to Roseburg, where my wife saw that ad in the paper that Charlie put. It's just this little tiny ad that says, if you want to, you know, look at healthy living, come to this class at noon. And I was not really wanting to go. First off, it's like, well, what's wrong with the food I'm eating? I really like it. It's really good. And so I know when I went to that first class, I probably had that, arms crossed, sitting in the middle of the row, just looking at Charlie going, the heck are you talking about? But sat there and we listened to that whole class, and just the information that he had given out, talked about Gregor, threw up a couple videos, and it was like, we've got to study this and look at this. And it probably was 2 weeks later that we said, okay, let's give it. And I'm like, let's give it a month and we'll see what happens. And we basically kind of cleaned out the fridge, and we started on a real low fat. It was, much, much higher carbohydrates than I had been used to eating, and still a lot of greens. And what happened was,
It was very scary. I can tell you the 2 weeks were very frightening. Both my internal part, I really thought we were doing something harmful for us, but just with Stu, what was going on with his blood sugars was very scary.
so they basically, and within a 24-hour period, and that's kind of the amazing thing. And I always like to tell people that are going to start this is you don't wait for a couple weeks for something to happen. It starts happening the minute you stop putting high fat things in your mouth. Like within 12 hours, my blood sugars were just plummeting, and I'm controlling it. And I'm like, normally I would cut down my insulin little by little. And now that I think about it, I should have cut down way faster than what I was doing, but it was really scary to cut insulin back. But within, I would say 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I had cut my total insulin amount by about 2/3. So just taking this very little amount and still having a fair amount of low blood sugars, and it's like still kind of cutting back. And it was eye-opening. And so it's like, it wasn't just working within a month, it was working right away. And within a month, it's
Blood
like
pressure.
blood pressure is just, I'm dizzy all the time. I stand up and I'm about ready to faint. And it's like taking my blood pressure, and it's like, oh my gosh. And so started whittling down all my blood pressure medicines. I stopped my cholesterol medicine, which I didn't tell my wife that, but it's like, I got to stop this too. And I went to the doctor 3 months later, and it was like subnormal cholesterol. Blood pressure was normal without any blood pressure medications. And they're just like going, what did you do? And then I'm telling how much insulin I'm taking at this point, which is, I call it micro doses now. I just take, 5-6 units, so my total daily amount is like 20-25 units, which normal people would say, well, your pancreas is still making insulin if you're only taking that much. But nope, it's just when you have your cells working in your favor instead of against you, that's what you need.
And 6 months later, he looked like a new man. Like he had lost 60 pounds. He just had this super energy. All his symptoms that he had been having, he had some neuropathy pain. The pain was gone. His eye doctor told him his eyesight had gotten better. He could exercise amazingly, like walk me to work and then go on an hour bike ride. So it was amazing. My changes, we did this together. My changes, and I say this for women, is I had dramatic changes, but they were much slower. And I didn't have the type of change he had till 2 years of staying with the program, even though we were doing the same thing. At 2 years, I was 60 pounds down. But all of my risk factors also went away. My pre-diabetes went away. My high cholesterol turned into normal, and my blood pressure is normal 8 years later. Every time we check it, it's normal on the low side with no medicine. And Stu, 8 years ago, we started on a dime. And when we say we started whole food plant-based, I mean, we started overnight, and then we've never changed from that, other than within about 18 months, we started going more, cutting out all the salt, sugar, and oil, more so that I could start to realize the complete changes and get into like a normal weight range. So it's been pretty amazing now that he's been retired, 9 years.
9
He's
years
been
now.
retired and he's healthy.
Feel better now than I did like in my 30s, really. And my exercise level is as good as it was when I was way younger. Yeah, I mean, I work, like I worked at some of the diabetes camps. This is one funny story. We would go on bicycle rides with these
Children.
children that are like 12, 14 years old. And I'm on my bike and we kind of take off and we go up the hill and I stop and I look around and it's like, they've all gotten off their bikes and they're walking them up the hill. And so I ride the bike back down the hill and go, you're letting a 65-year-old man beat you up the hill on this bicycle. What are you guys thinking about here? But it was quite miraculous. And obviously we did not go back. We lasted longer than a month. And at this point in our lives, it's like, I always had the notion of dying early. And now it feels so good to be alive, to live. And that's what we do every day now.
Yep.
Story in a nutshell.
That's our story.
Thank you guys. That's great.
Wow. You're brought tear to my eyes again. Every time I hear your story, I'm just so inspired. And I just hope the people who are attending this class really feel the same impact. Do you have any questions? Anybody in the room care to have any curiosity about how they managed to accomplish this, how difficult it was for them to make that transition? Anything? Yes, iPhone.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So did they cut sour cream and cheese, salt and oil?
You want to answer that, Stu? Sharon?
Yes, we've cut all dairy products. And I would say, there's still so much salt in stuff. We try to do our best to keep the salt at a minimum. Now, Sharon actually does fine with a little bit of salt, but I seem to be salt sensitive. So, and if I get a little salt, my blood pressure would kind of go up again. So it's important for us, again, in the long run, just to bypass that.
Do you miss those things that she
Not
mentioned?
Not anymore. There's too many benefits. And I think you've said this too, Charlie, but it's like, I love to cook because I love to eat. And the food that we are making now almost becomes more flavorful without the salt and the extra sugar and all that extra stuff. It's like you're really getting to enjoy food in like as nature intended it to be. And we just find it, we look forward to meals. Yeah, it's really wonderful, actually.
And we travel. So we've been traveling since 2016 and we live in a little RV. And we also travel to Mexico in the winter. So there are definitely times that we have to eat out. Our daughter came to visit us here this weekend and she wanted seafood. Now, our daughter doesn't follow the way we eat, but I can tell you she eats a lot more vegetables and unprocessed foods than she ever did because she sees us. But she still, she wanted seafood. So we took her out to places that there was always something for us. We would order like we'd have a side of broccoli each, and then they'd had, like a homemade black bean veggie burger. So we would order that and we would feel we were satisfied and not raining on her party, when she had like the seafood platter, so she could get some seafood. So we, when we eat out, we know that if someone else is controlling it, there's some salt in it and there's likely some oil. So we're very cautious.
Any other questions? Feel free. Now's a good time. You've got a couple experts.
I have a question. What about tropical fruit? That has a lot of sugar in it. Do they eat it?
We eat a lot of tropical fruit. And yes, it has a lot of natural fructose sugar in it. But amazingly enough, the amount of insulin that I have to take does not go up by eating any kind of fruit. So it's almost a staple day to day. We eat a fair amount of fruit, even though they would tell someone with type 1 diabetes to cut a lot of that fruit out.
For breakfast, we often have 3 to 4 servings of fruit for breakfast. He will, his blood sugar is sensitive and will go up with white rice. It will go up quickly.
Quicker than with fruit, tropical fruit. What you find is really interesting. But it's like that type of starch breaks down quicker than normal fructose. Yeah, so it is kind of.
Yeah, I was just saying interject because it's because there's more fiber in the fruit than there is in the white rice. So the white rice has had most all the fiber stripped out and there's no water, whereas fruit, you have the slow absorption because of the fiber in the water. And and the reason that Stu is able to tolerate these foods now is because he reversed his insulin resistance, like we talked about last week. So the amount of insulin he takes every day, 20 to 25 units, that's what we call physiologic insulin. So that just means like all of us sitting here right now today that don't have diabetes, that's about how much insulin our pancreas secretes every day, is about 20 to 25 units. So Stu has reversed his insulin resistance, even though he still has to take insulin every day because he doesn't produce any on his own because he has type 1. But those of you with type 2, and even if you're on insulin, you can often get off the insulin for good if you adopt this diet and lifestyle.
Marcia.
Yeah, Stu, with you taking insulin, do you also have to take a pill with that, like metformin or anything?
No, people with type 1, their pancreas, the metformin is to help you produce more insulin to cover that. And with a person with type 1 diabetes, their pancreas is basically shut off. So a pill, it's already not producing any insulin, and the pill will not make it start producing insulin. So it's solely just taking insulin injections.
Okay.
So that's his only medicine is insulin and a vitamin B12.
Okay, because I know someone that has to take both insulin and metformin.
Yes, and a lot of people with type 2, as it kind of develops, will end up doing that after they've kind of stressed your insulin producing cells in your pancreas. They will start dropping off and failing, and then they're having to take insulin along with their medication to help speed up that amount that they can make.
Okay.
Your friends are not likely doing what Stu's doing, and that's decreasing their insulin resistance. They're eating foods that are higher in fat. And so they could reverse it. Eric.
Yeah, Stu, I was wondering if your blood sugars react difficultly to sweet potatoes. How's that do?
Not any different than fruit. Probably like Scott says, I think a sweet potato is sweet, but there's so much fiber that it actually blunts that effect spiking sugars. Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, we always have sweet potatoes in the galley. Yeah, that's kind of a staple.
Great.
Yeah.
My other question is, we know that type 2 diabetes is more genetic, and it's, of course, it's not like an automatic thing that if you get type 2 diabetes that you're gonna pass that on. You pass on a gene that makes you susceptible to it. But with type 1, it's less genetic, and there are some things, environmental things that are associated with it. One of them being dairy. I was just kind of curious. I'm sure
Yeah.
most people ate a lot of dairy as kids, my age and your age. But I was wondering if you ate a lot of dairy growing up.
Well, that's a funny question
It's a good
because it's
question.
a great question. There is diabetes in my family, genetically, and I grew up on a ranch farm in Eastern Oregon that we had milk cows when I was little. And
Mhm.
Sharon and I talk about this, but my mom actually had some bad bleeding when I was born. And so from what I can get from it, my grandmother and my aunt took me home. And so I was probably fed Eagles brand
Or dairy milk.
or just plain cream,
Yeah, from
dairy cream from the
the
cow,
cows. Yeah,
my first several weeks, months of life.
first
So
weeks.
right off the bat, I was giving, dairy.
Cow's milk.
And, after reading the China study, Colin Campbell talks about, how countries with no dairy have really low incidence of
Diabetes.
type 1 diabetes.
Mhm.
And, he talks about it probably being that protein in the cow's milk that it looks really similar to a islet cell in the pancreas that produces insulin. And so your regular white cells are attacking your own insulin producing cells and wiping them out. Again, that's
Should tell about your aunt and then maybe your cousins, your aunt, your mom's sister.
so. Yes, in 1937, my mom's sister was age 7, and this is just 10 years after insulin was actually discovered and started being putting out, but it hadn't made it out into rural country settings. And so I had an aunt at age 7 who died from type 1 diabetes. So again, they had dairy cows. And, at this point in my life and our studies, it's like, I wish we could tell our country that you're putting your children at a really high risk just by letting them have dairy.
And he comes from Norwegian descent. His grandfather was Norwegian. And so,
That's where I got the beard.
and
good.
the blue eyes, the blonde complexion, the phenotype. But he does have a nephew. His niece's son has diabetes type 1, and he's 18, kind of really struggling, but a healthy 18-year-old. And then he had another cousin whose son developed diabetes, and he has died. He died of
Young.
He died at about age 45. So it is definitely a disease that still takes life way too early.
Any other questions? Check the audience here and I'll see if anybody has a hand up, or you can unmute if you choose. That's pretty, very powerful story. I'm so happy that you were able to share that with our group. Thank you so much for taking the time and driving to find an internet connection and, making it happen. I think it's really helpful, and I'm sure that the patients of the medical student who's attending and the potential medical student will benefit from having heard your story, that there is something, that the current medical practice of a pill for every ill is just treating symptoms, not the root cause. And when you treat the root cause like you've done, you can get tremendous benefits and really get the health that you deserve. So kudos to you both.
And also just that it's safe with people with type 1 diabetes, because we were not sure 8 years ago if this really was a safe way to eat, but it was safe. And one person, Stu has one person he knows in Boise who adopted a whole food plant-based diet, and she has had diabetes since she was like 6.
So again, the same amount of time, about 50, 52, 53 years.
Yeah.
And again, she was a nurse also that we worked at the diabetes camp. And again, kind of went through the research and looked at the, what's out there, all the people that you guys are talking about and doing the study. And it's like, sure enough. And she, when we talk to her, she just feels wonderful. She's lost a lot of weight. And, both of us, most people that do this are just like, why could I have not found this way earlier than when I did find it? It's like, I just wish I could have started this in the 70s.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes.
Yeah, we're really grateful to you both, and keep up the good work. Keep sharing your thoughts with others, and you're changing the world bit by bit. Thank you. Okay, so I'll ask for more questions in a bit. I'm going to play a video first. First, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to do plant-based diets recognized by the American Diabetes Association as the first video. I got a little late start here, and so I need to find this on my diabetes. I think it's number, I don't know, 10 maybe. Yeah, here it is. Plant-based diets recognized by Diabetes Association.
Dr. King Williams, immediate past president of the American College of Cardiology, started out an editorial on plant-based diets with the classic Schopenhauer quote that all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as like, duh, of course. In 2013, plant-based diets for diabetes were in the ridiculed stage in the official endocrinology practice guidelines, placed in the fad diets section. They acknowledged strictly plant-based diets have been shown to reduce the risk for type 2 diabetes and improve management of diabetes better than the American Diabetes Association recommendations, but then inexplicably go on to say that the evidence doesn't support the use of one type of diet over another with respect to diabetes or in general. The best approach for a healthy lifestyle is simply the amelioration of unhealthy choices, whatever the heck that means. But by 2015, the clinical practice guidelines from the same professional associations explicitly endorsed as their general recommendation for diabetic patients a plant-based diet. Times they are a-changin'. The American Diabetes Association itself is also now on board, listing it as one of the dietary patterns acceptable for the management of the condition. But the Canadian Diabetes Association has really taken the lead. Type 2 diabetes is considered one of the fastest-growing diseases in Canada, representing a serious public health concern, so they're not messing around, recommending plant-based diets for disease management because of their potential to improve body weight and blood sugar control, as well as heart disease risk, in addition to reducing the need for diabetes medications. They use the Kaiser Permanente definition, a regimen that encourages whole plant-based foods and discourages meats, dairy, and eggs, as well as all refined and processed junk. They recommend diabetes education centers in Canada improve patients' perceptions of plant-based diets by developing educational materials and providing individualized counseling sessions to address what barriers people have to eating plant-based. The biggest barrier identified was ignorance. Nearly 9 out of 10 patients interviewed had never even heard of using a plant-based diet to treat diabetes. Why is that? Maybe patient awareness of the benefits are being influenced by the perception of the diabetes educators and clinicians. See, most of the staff were aware, yet only about 1 in 3 were currently recommending it. Why not? One of the common reasons given was that they didn't think their patients would do it, so they didn't even bring it up. But this notion is contrary to the patient survey results they cite, in which most patients said they would be willing to at least give it a try. The researchers cite the PCRM Geico studies I did videos about, in which strictly plant-based diets were well accepted, with an over 95% adherence rate, presumably because they just felt so much better, increased energy, better digestion, better sleep and satisfaction. A number of staff members also expressed their second reason for not recommending this diet, not being clear about the supportive scientific evidence, but has been shown to be more effective than an American Diabetes Association recommended diet at reducing the use of diabetes medication, long-term blood sugar control, and cholesterol. It's therefore possible that the diabetes educators were simply behind the times, as there's a lag time in dissemination of new scientific findings from the literature to the clinician and finally to the patient. That's one of the reasons I started nutritionfacts.org, to speed up the process. As Dr. Williams put it, the evidence for the benefits of plant-based nutrition continues to mount. This now includes lower rates of stroke, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, heart attacks, and cardiac death, as well as many non-cardiac issues that affect our patients in cardiology, ranging from cancer to a variety of inflammatory conditions. The science we got. The bigger challenge is overcoming the inertia, culture, and habit, and widespread marketing of unhealthy foods. He concludes, reading the existing scientific literature and evaluating the impact of plant-based nutrition clearly represents the single most important yet underutilized opportunity to reverse the pending obesity and diabetes-induced epidemic of disease and death.
So I'm going to play one more video, The Best Diet for Diabetes. Then we're going to take a few questions, and I'm going to have Scott show you the website for the new.
There are all sorts of different scoring systems to rate diet quality. My favorite, for its simplicity, is the Dietary Phytochemical Index, a fancy name for a simple concept. It's just the percentage of your calories from whole plant foods, so 0 to 100. The average American diet has a score of 12 out of 100. So like on a scale of 1 to 10, our diet is a 1. You can split people up based on how they score and show how the higher you score, the better your metabolic markers when it comes to diabetes risk. There appears to be like this stepwise drop in insulin resistance and insulin-producing beta cell dysfunction as you eat more and more plant-based. And that highest group was only scoring about 30. Less than a third of their diet was whole plant foods, but better than the lowest, which was down around the standard American diet. No wonder. Diets centered around plants, emphasizing legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, and discouraging most or all animal products, are especially potent in preventing type 2 diabetes, and as a little bonus, has been associated with much lower rates of obesity, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, cardiovascular mortality, and cancer. And not just preventing type 2 diabetes, but treating it as well. A systematic review and meta-analysis found that the consumption of vegetarian diets is associated with improved blood sugar control. But how much improved? Here's one of the latest trials. The effect of a strictly plant-based diet centered around brown rice, it was done in Asia, versus the conventional diabetic diet on blood sugar control of patients with type 2 diabetes, a 12-week randomized clinical trial. For the diabetic control diet, they set up food exchanges and calculated specific calorie and portion controls, whereas on the plant-based diet, people could eat as much as they want. That's one of the benefits. The emphasis is on food quality rather than quantity, and they still actually lost more weight. But even after controlling for the greater abdominal fat loss in the plant-based group, they still won out. Of course, it only works if you actually do it, but those that pretty much stuck to the healthier diet dropped their A1C levels 0.9%, which is what you get taking the leading diabetes drug, but of course only with good side effects. Yeah, but would it work in an underserved population? The impact of a plant-based diet support program on mitigating type 2 diabetes in San Bernardino, the poorest city of its size in California. A randomized controlled trial, but not of a plant-based diet itself, as the title suggests, but of just an education program telling people about the benefits of a plant-based diet for diabetes, and then it was up to them. And still got a significant improvement in blood sugar control. Here are the numbers. Got a little better in the control group, but way better in the plant-based instruction and support group. And more plant-based diets are not just effective in the prevention and management of diabetes, but also its complications. Check this out. One of the most devastating complications of diabetes is kidney failure. This shows the decline in kidney function in 8 diabetics in the 1 or 2 years before switching their diets. They all showed this steady, inexorable decline on a fast track to complete kidney failure and dialysis. But then they switched to a special supplemented vegan diet, and their kidney decline was stopped in its tracks. Imagine if they had switched a year or two earlier. Most diabetics don't actually end up on dialysis, though, because they die first. Cardiovascular disease is the major cause of premature mortality among diabetics. That's why plant-based diets are perfect. There's a general scientific consensus that the elements of a whole food plant-based diet, legumes, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and nuts with limited or no intake of processed foods and animal products, are highly beneficial for preventing and treating type 2 diabetes. Equally important, plant-based diets address the bigger picture by simultaneously treating cardiovascular disease, our #1 killer, along with obesity, high blood pressure, lowering inflammation, and we can throw cancer into the mix too, our #2 killer. The bottom line is that the case for using a plant-based diet to reduce the burden of diabetes and improve overall health has never been stronger.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share. I see there's one question in the chat, perhaps. Maybe not. So we're looking for some questions. Don't be shy. If you're thinking about something, other people probably are thinking about it also. And feel free to speak up, and we're here to have fun and learn a little bit from each other.
I have a question.
Yes, Trouty.
What about cosmetics and lotions and so on? Do they absorb when they have the ingredients as sugar or sweet or anything in there?
I haven't given that a lot of thought. Scott, what's your take? Have you heard anything about that?
No, I mean, chemicals can absorb through the skin, different carcinogens and things like that. But as far as like coconut oil, for example, if you put it on your skin, the fat doesn't get into your bloodstream or anything like that. It's safe to use coconut oil on your skin. You just don't want to eat it. But as far as other lotions, anything that maybe has sugar in it, that's not going to penetrate your skin and get into your bloodstream at all.
Okay,
Joan.
thank you.
This question's for Sharon. I wanted her to talk more about when she decided to eliminate oils and sugars and salt, and what that approach was for her and what that looks like.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, initially that wasn't like as our big plan was getting rid of all the animal proteins, like no meats, no dairy, and doing that and incorporating in our day-to-day life. And the first 1.5 years I was working full-time. But I guess the big trigger was I had plateaued as far as I felt like I felt really good, but that I'd really plateaued, especially in getting down to a normal BMI. And for me, that was important. You know, it seemed like it happened to Stu really quickly, and I felt like that was that risk factor that I could get rid of. So we actually talked to Dr. Ross and would talk to him about helping us tweak things. And so at one point, then we were starting to read a lot of literature from, let's say, Alan Goldhammer from True North, some of the cookbooks that were coming out of that, Chef AJ, and just hearing a lot about SOS Free. And so we did it actually as like an additional intervention. And I ordered several cookbooks. Kathy Fisher's cookbook is an SOS Free. Trying to think of the name of hers. Kathy, it's a CATHY Fisher. She actually is one of the cook demonstration people from True North and also Dr. McDougall's programs. And I think those were the main ones, unprocessed by Chef AJ. So when we started it, that was what it took, because my hemoglobin A1C actually, even doing whole food plant-based, I had a number that was 5.7. So it was right at starting to go pre-diabetes again. So I would say those two things, the pre-diabetes by blood sugar, by as the risk factor, by my lab, and then also just not happy that I was doing so faithfully following whole food plant-based and wasn't in a normal BMI. And that's what did it. You know, that was my final 6 months that then I was, my next hemoglobin A1C was 5.5. And that was the first time I went to my doctor and I was at a normal BMI in like, you know, since my early 30s. Interestingly, my doctor counseled me that time about, it was like, I was really like my first BMI that I'm normal in the normal BMI. And she wondered if maybe I had an eating disorder and becoming anorexic. So I was kind of disappointed. I really wanted her to celebrate the party with me, but I don't know, it concerned her that I was, you know, that was my goal, but that just happens. I could celebrate and have my own party.
My provider still in her chart, when I go in and talk to her and she can't believe what I'm doing. And I give her all of the people to go look at. And I go, you can even get medical CEUs through Bernard and these guys. And I give her all that information. And then I get my chart at the end of the day. And she writes, patient understands diet, but chooses not to follow it.
That's the American Diabetes Association.
That's
diet.
the American Diabetes Association. Diet.
You're
right.
not eating chicken, lean chicken, and
Yes.
whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
CYA.
Yeah. Hopefully I answered the question.
CYA.
Yeah.
Okay, Linda. Just go ahead and unmute yourself, Linda, and I'm watching to see when it happens. There you go.
I forgot about that.
No problem.
I can't speak so much to the sugar in the oil because I never used much of that, but I used to be a saltaholic. And even after I started this way of eating, I found it difficult to give the salt up. And we went to a lecture at the U of O when Dr. Clapper came. And he said a good way to get rid of the salt is don't cook with it. If you really feel you need to have it, sprinkle a little bit on your food before you eat it, but don't use it when you're cooking. And now I cannot stand a lot of things because they're way too salty for me. And I barely use the salt shaker at all. So that's probably a good way to start if you're having trouble with the salt.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, there are some side effects to doing this. One of them is your clothes sizes may get smaller and you may have to buy a few new clothes. The salt, the food may not taste the same when you go out and eat in restaurants or whatever, and those sorts of issues. Dolly?
Hi, you guys.
Hi.
Stu and Sharon, I just wondered if you allow yourselves like whole wheat or 100% whole wheat or whole grain breads, like tortillas or just even a piece of bread for half a sandwich or something.
So we support whole grains being healthy, and neither of us have any trouble with gluten. There are a lot of people with type 1 diabetes who do have actual issues with gluten. So, but Stu tolerates gluten fine. We do find if we don't, we both love bread. Stu probably loves bread way more than me. So, I mean, we'll gain weight. So we don't buy a lot of bread. We don't have it in our around very often. And we do whole wheat, high fiber tortillas for meals, but you will tend to, it's hard if you have a weight loss goal to have a lot of extra bread. It's just not, it's not very calorie dense. So we just find it's something that I think whole grains are healthy. We had a meal today. We cooked a meal in our pressure cooker. It was black-eyed peas, and it was very spicy because both of us tolerate spices. So it had jalapenos and these chipotle chilies in it. Very tasty meal. And I had some extra bulgur that I had in the refrigerator that I'd cooked for another meal. And I put probably about 3/4 of a cup of cooked bulgur in there. So we're not opposed at all to grains. It's just sometimes when you have beans and, and we love beans, we try to eat a lot of beans, but a lot of beans and adding breads or a tortilla will just get you, way long on, if, it will be hard to lose weight if that's something you're trying.
Bread is just too convenient. It's so easy to grab a slice of bread and put some peanut butter on. And if you have one, you're going to have another one. So it's just,
it's not filling.
It's just not filling. And yeah, so it's like we do have it, but we don't just have a loaf in a bread box all the time. Usually if there's a meal that's going to require that, we make Reubens with tempeh and sauerkraut, and we'll go out and look for rye bread, that's a vegan, without the
eggs,
high oil and butter. And but it's not we definitely do not have bread with every meal, maybe once a week.
Probably that first year, remember when Stu did his first year, when we did it together, I was working, and for lunch, almost every day, Stu would make me a chickpea salad sandwich. So 2 pieces of bread, and that's what I ate every day for lunch. But like a year into it, my weight loss was, so much slower as far as getting to what would be considered more of a normal weight.
That's what I'm finding with myself. My husband's lost quite a bit of weight, and I'm just I'm losing, but it's just ever so slow.
Yep. And I think it's normal that it takes women. I think it takes longer. I've heard that story a lot between men and women who are eating about the same food, but the man loses faster than the woman. Yeah. So don't give up. That's I did
so much.
Give up. You're welcome.
So, Brett, are you interested? Are you talking to the TV? If you want to unmute, if you have a question, or maybe you're talking with somebody else. Anybody else have a question? Or a thought? Oh, there was a hand up, and Joan.
I want to know when you're on the road, how you work exercise into your life.
That must be to Stu and Sharon again.
Yes.
Well, luckily we're still retired. So actually right now we are giving tours of a lighthouse on the Washington coast at Cape Disappointment. And so for me, for my 4 hours of doing lighthouse tours, it's 70 steps up and down a lighthouse. And so I'm doing that all day. And then we're in the park. So we have hiking trails all around, and we're hiking, we probably hike at least 2 miles a day. And then on our days off, we'll do 5-10 miles. So lots of walking. We're not biking quite as much because the weather here is on the Oregon, Washington coast. It's quite rainy and windy. So it's a little harder.
And in Mexico, when we were there, we actually started a little program using YouTube, and we both together kind of as accountability buddies. We were like trying to fit it out earlier in the day than waiting, but we were doing a similar program to the 9-minute New York Times program. We would find one on the internet that focused on things that we know are good for us, like functional exercises. So doing a lot, I wouldn't call them squats. They're more like sitting in the chair and hovering on the chair, but it's a squat, but trying to make it be a functional exercise for people who are, I'm 66 to 65. So we want to build strength in muscles that preserve walking and getting out of a chair and balance. So we'll find things to really work on balance, and then flexibility, because I think it feels good.
Thank you.
These are great questions, and the support from the group. That's what we love about these sessions. When we get together, we don't know what these classes are for you. We try to give some additional education, but really the question and answer is one of the best benefits. We got a note in here from one of the participants about being a certain weight, who believes that he's not much heavier simply because he doesn't drink a lot of soda. Let's see, but I'm inspired to eat healthier because Dr. Eric in this seminar too. So we appreciate the thanks. We want to encourage you to incorporate more foods that are grown in nature, more fruit, more vegetables, more whole grains, more beans and lentils, those sorts of foods, to displace much of the meat, dairy, and eggs that you're currently eating. And I know that transition can be difficult at times because your taste buds, you like what you're eating and you're used to it, and your family likes to eat that. And, it seems like there are barriers. How do I do this? Am I going to be by myself? Is no one ever going to like me again because I don't eat the same foods that they eat? We've all had those struggles. And that's another reason for having these classes, is to change our culture and bring health to our country. If you look around, we have an epidemic of diabetes and heart trouble and overweight. We have got to do something different than what we've been doing. And these classes are doing that difference, and it costs people less money. So we encourage you to keep on track as best as you can. Remember, if you can't attend a class, these are recorded, these sessions, so you can go to the archive sessions. And Scott, maybe you want to do another quick share for those people who are new, tell them how they can get to it and what resources there are for them.
You bet. Get this out of the way here. There we go. Go back to the home page here. So the website address is www.livelifestylemedicine.com. So all I have to remember is livelifestylemedicine.com. And to get a full tour of this website, I have a 15-minute full tour of the website recorded here. So if you scroll down on the homepage and just click right here, website tutorial, you'll get an in-depth tour of what's all available on the website. But just to kind of show the new people kind of the real basics real quick here about the diabetes class. And if you want to kind of get caught up, if you're new to this and you want to start it off at the beginning, Charlie was mentioning the class archives right here. So if you click on class archives, this tab here, and go to 2023 classes for this year, click on that. And then you can go, here's last week's class is always here at the top. And then you can scroll back down. If you want to start at the beginning, you could go, but you could eventually catch back up with us if you have the time. You can watch Charlie and I's introduction classes. We have, these are for how to get started with this, getting inspired. And then classes on meal preparation and planning. And then we have classes in February that were focused on weight management, food addiction and behavior change. And then in March, we had classes kind of focusing on the mental health, the behavior, also with behavior parts, how important that is. And then a class on nutritional myths and other popular diets there in April, along with more on the other popular diets, the diet wars. And then these last 2 weeks, last week and this week on diabetes. But yeah, definitely check out the full tour on the website by watching here. You'll see there's cookbooks and recipes and all kinds of educational videos, educational handouts related to the classes. And you could, if you're not already on the newsletter list, you can subscribe right here. And if you subscribe, you'll get a welcome email. And then every Sunday morning, I send out the class email, and it has other benefits on it, other opportunities, educational opportunities, talks about the free health coaching, the Facebook group. We have all kinds of support in order to, because we know it's not enough to just know and just to hear this information. In this format, we know it takes a lot more than that. It takes a lot of support and just to create a culture around this so that you could be successful. But definitely, if you don't receive the welcome newsletter or newsletter every Sunday morning, check your junk file spam folder. I put that there because a lot of times that happens. People say, "Oh, I was getting the Sunday morning email and I don't get it anymore," and it's because it sometimes goes to the junk file. But yeah, so definitely spend some time there. Take advantage of that. I also have a local group for even more support than these classes. If you go to Eugene Plant-Based Providers website, which I have a link to right here, it's a whole nother website where we have community education. We have the links to the class right here, but we also have an upcoming events section. We do different community activities. We had in February and April, we had a movie social where we got together and watched an inspiring movie and had plant-based snacks. Got together, we had 37 for one of them and a 33 for the other one, so lots of people showed up. We've done dietitian-led grocery store tours. We're going to be doing cooking demonstrations coming up. We have a community walk every month starting in May. We did that last year as well. We have a potluck coming up in June. So keep an eye on this Eugene Plant-Based Providers website, and we have all the different providers in the area that are members of this, and we're a nonprofit, and so take advantage of that as well, just for more support, more chances to get together and support each other.
Thank you very much, Scott, for sharing that. And I also want to make it clear, some of you are a little shy about either speaking up or asking for help. This is a classroom situation, so it can be a bit embarrassing. And some of you can require some one-on-one time. It's totally free. We have one third-year medical student who's been involved with that. I will do some free counseling to help people kind of get kick-started and help them along on their journey. There's no cost for that. We're here to support you in any way that works for you. If you're able to do it off the website, great. If you need a little extra attention one-on-one, just send us a note and we can make it happen. With that said, are there any questions? I have one last video that I would share with you, but I prefer to have questions, you know, if you have something that's burning on your mind.
I have a question.
Yes,
My
Trouty.
doctor was saying for the fingernails to grow, I should eat Jello. Well, Jello has sugar in it, and it's a man-made thing. I have not eaten it anymore. What's your take on it?
Well, my fingernails grow great and I don't eat any Jello. And Jello, I think, has some animal product in it along with the sugar. So I would avoid that. You know, I don't know what to tell you, Trouty, about that nail issue. I guess we can discuss that further. I'll do some further research,
Okay,
but
I have another question.
yes.
What about sea vegetables?
Sea vegetables are important if you are totally not using any iodized salt in your life. Then you need to get iodine from somewhere. You can get it from sea vegetable, you can get it from iodine tablets, but sea vegetables not only have iodine in them, but they also have omega-3. And if you eat wakame, that has the most medium and long chain omega-3s.
What about
So,
nori?
what is it?
Nori.
Nori is fine also, that you get with sushi. I think Dr. Greger recommends a couple sheets a day, that sort of thing. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Anybody else?
Here I am.
Okay, Ken, what's on your mind?
Worry, what's he going to say this time? It's on my mind, and it's been on my mind this whole class. We're talking about sweet potatoes and not using oil. Excuse me, I just had some hazelnuts. So most of us have air fryers, and air fryers are wonderful, especially if there's only one or two of you. Because the thing you hardly ever use, your high energy sucking oven. But I have a Kosori. And if anybody in here has a Kosori, you probably are aware there's this recall, and I've been, following it, and all the there's a couple of websites where people share their experience of dealing with Kosori. I guess I'm asking that if anybody has a Kosori and they know anything about the recall, maybe they can come on Facebook and share their experience. I haven't contacted the company, but a lot of people don't want to do it because they make you cut the cord. I'm sorry. I don't know if they make you send the machine back, but they make you cut the cord and take a picture of it and make sure you're not using it anymore. So I've just resigned myself to keep using it and just unplug it when I'm not using it, and certainly unplug it along with all my other countertop utensils when I leave. So if anybody knows anything about this Kosori recall, I'd like to know more. But I'm having a huge issue with some insurance companies over a crash that wasn't my fault. Of course, that's what everybody says, but in my case, the officer said the guy is responsible. So I'm afraid to deal with any kind of entities, businesses, warranties, anything like that, because they just go on and on and on. So I'm done, but I'm hoping that if anybody knows anything about this Kosori recall, say something on Facebook. I'll be watching. I'll also make an entry on it.
Okay, We'll do that, Ken. Thank you.
And I'll get
Now-
a hold of Brett Ledoux.
Okay. Now, a lot of people who might be new are thinking like, geez, I've got to give up something. That's not a great mindset. And in the chat room, Kim has written a little note, but maybe she could unmute herself and kind of discuss with our group what they might use to help themselves get through this or be more successful with a transition.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim. Nice to meet you. This is my first class and it's been an enjoyable time. Yeah, I like to embrace the mindset that I'm not eliminating things from my diet. I was vegan in college and then I moved back home and I wasn't vegan anymore. But I remember during that time, everyone always said, you know, you're eliminating all of these nutrients and animal protein from your diet. You must not eat anything. You must just eat salads. And it was quite the opposite. Because I didn't have any of that animal protein, dairy, eggs, I was more inclined to try other fruits and vegetables that I've never really had in my diet growing up. So to help with the transition, it kind of feels restrictive to think that you're just eliminating these things. But if you think about how much new things that you're trying, it kind of makes it more exciting to continue this plant-based diet or any type of diet that you're trying that's different from what you're used to. So I like to get rid of the scarcity mindset and just embrace that, the enrichment mindset.
Thanks for sharing that. It really is an important concept, and the people who are most successful do take this on by not having that mindset of how I'm having to give up things. I'm reaching for health. I encourage people to think every time you reach for a food, ask yourself, is this going to help me reach my goal? So effectively, you're working toward reaching something that's going to give you a reward as opposed to you're denying yourself something. So thanks for sharing that. Arun.
Good evening. Good evening, Charles.
Good evening.
Yeah, well, yesterday I had that colonoscopy.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to share a couple of points there.
Okay.
Whole week before, like 5 days, they want you to follow this diet, which was more or less no fiber diet, I mean, they don't want you to eat oatmeal or whole wheat breads or whole grains or raw vegetables or, they wanted you to eat more of cheese or yogurt or milk or whatever. Anyways, so that was a little harder to, I say, what can I eat if I cannot eat whole grains or if not salad? And anyways, I survived. Basically, the last day I basically fasted, just water and the, the liquid that prep, which was okay. And I amazingly, after 2 movements, my movements were clean. And yeah, so that worked okay. And it was 8 years, that was, since I had the previous colonoscopy. And there was no problem as far as I could tell. The doctor said there were only a couple of 1 millimeter wide, polyps, which he thought was fine. Not a problem, because the time before there were a lot more. And obviously 8 years ago, I was not doing as much of a plant-based diet. I mean, I was still a vegetarian, but I did a lot more of, animal products that time, like cheese and eggs and yogurt and all that. So anyways, so I'm wanting to share that. And I also wanted to know one other thing, and I'm trying to remember that. I guess I'm having a senior moment now that
Okay. Well, while you're thinking about that, I will make a couple comments and I'll get back with you.
Okay.
So For every 10 grams of fiber you add to your diet, you're going to decrease your colon cancer risk by about 10%. The average American only is getting about 14, 15 grams of fiber a day. So I'm eating about 60 to 80 grams of fiber a day, which has reduced my colon cancer risk by about 50 or 60%. If you listen to Dr. John McDougall, he'll tell you, hey, don't worry so much about doing colonoscopy, get sigmoidoscopy, because there are some complications associated with the colonoscopy. You could use a Cologuard or a FIT test, which are new test technology for picking up some cells without having to do that full prep, which kind of knocks out your microbiome. Maybe in the future, we'll have have patients save a little sample of their stool when they get their colon completely prepped, and they'll swallow that capsule after the procedure and repopulate their microbiome. I know that sounds a little gross, but we may find in the future that may be the healthiest thing. So that's my little piece.
Okay, yeah. So
Go
I
ahead,
wanted
Aran.
Yeah, I wanted to add, so yesterday after the colonoscopy, I was getting a lot of gas. And
Yep.
I remembered, I said, well, okay, I need to have some probiotic something, so I had a couple of spoons of yogurt just to do, bring that good bacteria in. And today I had a big salad that I had missed for the last few days, and I enjoyed it a lot. So that was really nice to say that. Yeah, and the doctor said, keep up with your good high fiber diet. So I think he appreciated that.
Well, that's great. Now, there was a study done in Israel which showed that those people who swallowed a capsule of their own stool actually repopulated their microbiome within a couple days, maybe a day or two. And those people who just ate a regular diet and didn't take probiotics, it took them, I think it was close to 5 days or a week. I can't remember the amount, but it took almost a month for many who took probiotics, because when you take probiotics, it kind of populates your microbiome with organisms that you're may or may not be used to, and they kind of colonize and they fight off what your normal bacteria would be. So it's something we're going to have to do more research on in the future, but it's an interesting study out of Israel done a few years ago.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Marcia and then Linda.
Yeah, addressing Aaron, I had my colonoscopy be done, 2-3 weeks ago, and they never said anything about not eating fiber or anything, changing my diet at all. Except the last day, of course, I couldn't eat, just had to have that junk.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to change what I was eating, and it came out quick. No polyps, but I do have a spot diver or something.
Diverticulosis.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, that's a little out-pocketing from a lower fiber diet earlier on in your life.
Yeah, but other than that, everything was fine.
Well, that's good. Congratulations. Keep it up. Linda.
For those of us who find swallowing that capsule a bit distasteful, couldn't the doctor just put it in there on his way out?
That's a good thought. I like that. And, medicine may progress to the point where it just gets deposited back in that way. I think that's great. I'll try to recommend that in the future. Good thought,
Okay.
Linda. I like it. Again, another benefit of having these classes with various points of view. It kind of stretches all of our brains. This has been fun so far. I have one more video that we were going to share. Maybe are we having an open forum coming up sometime?
Yeah, next week's open forum. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's Neil Bernard. It's tackling diabetes with a bold new approach, and so we may share that with you next time. But any other questions? This has been quite fun. and a good educational experience, I hope, for most of you. Yeah, go ahead, Joan.
So when you take, when a patient takes antibiotics and then they end up with a yeast infection, does a whole food plant-based diet help your chemistry not give you a yeast infection?
You get yeast infections vaginally. The food is generally promoting more of the GI system. I don't know of any study that shows that you would have less of an impact for the yeast infections. I think if you're prone to that, you're likely going to get it. Scott, do you know of any studies that address that
No,
issue?
I don't know of any studies on vaginal yeast infections with dietary change. No.
Yeah, that's a good thought. But I will say this, you really want to be questioning your doctor, particularly if it's an older doctor like myself, who's used to writing a prescription for every sniffle and cough known to mankind. For years, when I was in practice, the expectation of patients was that we were going to write for some antibiotic for their health condition, earache or sore throat or cough or whatever. But the younger doctors are being trained that, most of these infections are generally viral infections, and you need to potentially look for other signs and symptoms that actually require antibiotic treatment. So it doesn't hurt to say, do I really need to take this, or could I try for a couple days and see what develops, and then if I'm not getting better, maybe I could start it. What's your thoughts on that? That's what I'd advise. Arun.
One question I had was, are you going to talk sometime about fasting as a way of treating health?
So we kind of discussed that a little bit, and fasting can help kickstart. We're not big fans. I don't like to starve, but I do intermittent fasting on a regular basis now. I'm kind of used to it. I eat up until about 6 o'clock, and then I don't start eating until about 9 or 10 in the morning.
So you do this 15, 16-hour fasting.
Correct. And it's oftentimes only 14 hours. So that's what I'm doing, but only because it works out okay, but I'm not fanatical about it. I don't know if it'll make a difference or not in my life. Go ahead.
We do have a whole class on fasting, as you recall. So that'll be coming up later in the year. If you want to watch, go back to the class archives for 2022 and you'll see it.
Okay.
If you want to watch it now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for reminding the old guy that we've got that on the schedule. I don't mind being the dinosaur. It's kind of fun, actually. Especially with the med students. They kind of get a kick out of talking to a dinosaur. Marcia.
Yeah, this is kind of for Scott. Well,
okay.
I'm having an appointment with my doctor on Monday. It's not until 1 o'clock. And I know she's going to weigh me. Should I not eat to affect my weight until afterwards?
No, you don't need to worry about that.
Because usually I do eat beforehand, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your life. You don't need to worry about your weight, whether you eat or not on the day you weigh.
Just wondering.
Yeah, let your doctor worry about your weight.
I'm trying to, yeah.
You focus your attention on, am I eating healthy foods? My weight will take care of itself. That's my thought.
That's true. I'm like, who was it? Sharon. I'm having trouble getting my last few pounds off. I'm fluctuating there. So.
Okay. So any last comments from anybody? This has been a really good session.
Thank you.
Okay. Scott, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you, everyone.
group and Stu and Sharon. We really are so grateful for both of you sharing your story. You know, again, I love to get a few tears in my eyes. The impact was amazing, and it inspires me to want to do more classes, listening to your story every time. And for the new people who logged on, I really hope that you find that these classes might be beneficial in a different way of either choosing different food choices or making a difference in how you ultimately practice and care for people you come into contact with, what you do, explain to your family and friends as to how they may gain health. It's not through another pill, it's their lifestyle choices. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, till next week.
Till the next time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
Night.
you.
A good week, everybody.
You too.
Bye.